In the dimly lit basement, the soft hum of electronics filled the air as I settled into my worn leather chair. Surrounding me, screens flickered with the constant vigil of my security setup. This wasn't just any routine check. Running an illegal operation meant I had to be vigilant. Enemies were a part of the game, and trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Each month, I meticulously reviewed hours of footage, looking for anything out of place. But tonight, my world was about to shatter in a way I never anticipated. As I sipped my lukewarm coffee, the screen on camera paused on a frame that caught my eye, not because of a lurking shadow or a masked intruder, but because of the familiar faces that filled the room upstairs. There was my wife, Clara, commanding with an authority I'd never seen, her eyes alight with a wild intensity. Beside her, on our very own bed, was my supposed friend, Rick, completely at her mercy and seemingly reveling in it. The shock was visceral, a punch to the gut. I had no idea he had such tendencies. I muttered to myself, the irony of my own hidden life not lost on me. I rewound the tape, my hands trembling. The betrayal cut deep, slicing through the facade of our marriage. The trust one had placed in Rick, the times I'd confided in him about the dangers of my business, now mocked me as I watched them together. In that moment, a cold resolve settled over me. Revenge. It was a path I knew well, but never thought I'd walk with Clara and Rick in my sights. I called Rick, keeping my voice even, inviting him over to discuss an urgent business idea. He agreed, suspect of nothing, eager as ever. Clara was out at her weekly book club, the perfect cover for her trysts, it seemed. As the doorbell rang, I tucked the phone recording into my pocket. Rick strode in, all smiles, clapping me on the back. "What's the big idea you couldn't text about?" he chuckled, easing onto the sofa. I poured us drinks, my back turned to hide my clenched jaw. "It's a risky venture," I began, handing him his glass. "Involves a lot of trust, you know?" Rick nodded, taking a sip, oblivious to the double entendre. "I'm all ears, man." I sat opposite him, fixing him with a steady gaze. "It's about partnerships. And how easily they can be compromised." I let the words hang between us, heavy and loaded. Rick's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, the phone recording ready in my hand. "How do you deal with betrayal, Rick? If your partner, in business or otherwise, goes behind your back?" Rick stiffened, the glass pausing at his lips. "Are we still talking about business?" "That's the thing about trust," I continued, ignoring his question. "Once it's broken, actions must be taken. Repercussions must be faced." I stood up, holding out the phone to him, the screen lit with the incriminating image. His face drained of color as he took in the scene, realizing the trap he'd walked into. "Now," I said, my voice low, "we're going to set some things right, Rick. And you're going to help me." As fear took root in Rick's eyes, I knew this was just the beginning. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was just getting started. Rick's eyes dart back and forth between the door and me, clearly calculating his chances. "Look, this isn't what it looks like," he stammers, but the conviction isn't there. He knows his court. I cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Save it, Rick. I've seen enough. But here's what you're going to do." My voice is icy, my stance rigid as I lay down the ultimatum. "You're going to call Clara, tell her to come home immediately. Say it's an emergency. Don't mention I know anything." Sweat beads on his forehead as he nods, pulling out his phone with shaky hands. I watch intently as he dials, putting him on speaker at my insistence. "Clara, babe, you need to come home. Now." "It's urgent," Rick's voice breaks slightly. There's a brief pause before Clara responds, her voice tinged with annoyance. "What's wrong, Rick? I'm in the middle of something." "Just come, please," he pleads. She sighs, resigned. Okay, I'm coming." As Rick ends the call, I motion for him to sit. Now, we wait. The tension is thick as we sit in silence, the minutes stretching into eternity. Finally, the sound of the front door creaking open echoes through the house, and Clara's footsteps approach. She bursts into the room, her expression shifting from concern to confusion upon seeing both of us so solemn. "What's going on?" "Rick said it was an emergency," she asks, looking between us. Before Rick can speak, I stand, confronting her directly. "Why don't you tell me what's been going on, Clara?" Her face falls and then hardens. "What are you talking about?" I don't respond verbally. Instead, I play the video right there on my phone. Her eyes widen with shock, then narrow in anger as she realizes her secret is out. "How long?" I ask, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Clara's defiance crumbles, and she mutters, "A few months." "I'm sorry, I never wanted you to find out this way." The betrayal stings, but I need to maintain control. "Well, I did. And now we need to deal with the consequences." At that moment, another figure steps into the room. It's Mike, my most trusted associate, a burly man whose loyalty I've bought over the years. He nods at me, understanding the situation without a word. Clara looks at Mike, then back at me, fear creeping into her eyes. "What are you planning to do?" "This isn't just about infidelity," I explain, my tone chillingly calm. "It's about trust and survival. In my line of work, betrayal can't be tolerated. Not ever." Mike steps forward, his presence imposing. "What do you want us to do, bossing?" What between Clara and Rick, weighing my options. "We're going to have a little trip to our facility upstate. A change of scenery might give you both some perspective on loyalty." Clara tries to protest, but Rick silences her with a resigned shake of his head. He knows better than to argue when lives are on the line. As we usher them out of the house and into the waiting car, I can't help but feel a pang of regret mingling with my anger. Trust, once broken, is irreparable, and as we drive away, I know there's no turning back. The journey ahead will not only test them but will redefine the boundaries of my own merciless world. At me, fear creeping into quietly as we glide along the highway, the city's lights fading into the distance. Clara and Rick sit in the back, a heavy silence enveloping them. Mike drives with a practiced calm, occasionally glancing at me through the rearview mirror. I break the silence. "Think carefully about what you're going to say when we get there. This isn't just a friendly outing," I say, my voice firm, allowing no room for misunderstanding. Clara wraps her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth inside the car. "What do you want from us?" Her voice is barely a whisper, tinged with fear and regret. "It's simple," I reply without turning to face her. "Loyalty, Clara. I want to understand why my wife and my friend would betray me." "What did you think was going to happen?" Rick shifts uncomfortably, leaning forward. "We never meant to hurt you," he starts, his voice earnest, pleading. "It just happened. We didn't think." "That's precisely the problem, Rick." "You didn't think," I cut him off sharply, turning to lock eyes with him in the rearview mirror. "In our business, not thinking can get you killed." Mike's phone buzzes, and he answers with a quick yes. After listening for a moment, he nods and hangs up, turning to me. "We're being followed. Looks like Tony's crew caught wind of something." My heart tightens, but my face remains impassive. "Take the next exit. We'll lose them in the back roads." The car veers off the highway, tires crunching on gravel as we descend into less traveled paths. Behind us, the faint headlights of our pursuers bob and weave, a menacing reminder of the dangers of my world. "Who's Tony?" Clara's voice is curious, a distraction from her own fears. "A competitor who'd love to see me weak," I explain, watching the lights behind us. "This situation with you and Rick? It's a perfect storm for him to exploit." As we snake through narrow lanes, Mike's skills come to the forefront. He maneuvers with precision, the car almost blending into the night. After a tense 20 minutes, the lights behind us disappear. "Looks like we lost them," Mike confirms, his tone relieved, but still tense. "Good," I acknowledge, then turn to address Clara and Rick again. "Listen, both of you. What happens next depends on your cooperation. If Tony thinks there's a rift he can exploit, it's not just your lives at risk, it's everyone connected to us. Clara nods, understanding the gravity of the situation. What do you need us to do? First, no more secrets. Second, when we get to the safe house, you're going to help me send a message to Tony, I state, laying out my plan. We'll let him know that despite personal issues, my organization stands strong. Rick looks skeptical. And you think that will stop him? It's not about stopping him. It's about showing strength. If he senses weakness, he'll keep coming. But if we stand united, he'll think twice. The rest of the drive is quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The car finally pulls up to a secluded cabin, the safe house. As we get out, the chill of the night air hits us, and I lead the way inside, ready to forge a plan that will either save us all or destroy everything I've built. The safe house is dimly lit and smells of old wood and mildew, a stark contrast to the comforts we're used to. Mike flips on a few more lights and checks the perimeter as I guide Clara and Rick into the main room. Sit down. We need to strategize, I command, pointing to the wooden table adorned with maps and a few scattered electronic devices. They comply, their faces etched with anxiety and fear, but there's a flicker of resolve in Clara's eyes that wasn't there before. As we settle, I lay out the plan. Tonight, we send a message to Tony, a video message. You two will be in it, showing that despite personal grievances, our group is united and stronger than ever. I explain, watching their reactions closely. Clara nods, catching on quickly. It's a show of strength, but it's also a bluff, she murmurs. Exactly, I confirm with a sharp nod. But there's more to this. We're not just sending a message, we're setting a trap. Rick leans forward, intrigue replacing some of his earlier fear. What kind of trap? We'll hint at a meeting location. Tony will think he's walking into a negotiation or a potential takeover. Instead, it will be an ambush, our guys ready to take his down. Mike re-enters, nodding to me that all is secure. We're clear. No signs of being followed anymore. Good. Let's set up the camera and get this message recorded, I say, moving to prepare the equipment. The recording goes smoothly. Clara and Rick speak earnestly into the camera, their words carefully chosen to project unity and strength. When the camera stops, Clara's shoulders slump slightly, the tension momentarily draining from her. Now, we wait, I announce, but as I do, my phone buzzes, a message from one of my insiders within Tony's crew. The text is brief, he's on the move, expects a meet at the old mill. Change of plans, I say abruptly, checking my watch. We move now. Mike, you and I will go to the mill. Rick, you stay here with Clara. Keep watch, and if you need to leave, use the back route. Rick nods, his expression grim but determined. As Mike and I ready ourselves to leave, Clara pulls me aside. Her hand is steady on my arm, her voice low. Be careful. And thank you for trusting us with this. The ride to the old mill is tense and silent. Mike and I are both armed, ready for what may come. As we approach, the shadows of Tony's men become visible. We take our positions, waiting for the right moment to strike. But just as we're about to move in, headlights pierce the darkness from an unexpected direction. A vehicle speeds into the mill area, and Tony's men turn, caught off guard. It's Clara and Rick, they shouldn't be here. What happens next is a blur of motion and noise. Clara and Rick leap from the vehicle, firing into the air. Tony's men are momentarily confused, which gives us the advantage we need. Gunfire exchanges, but it's clear who has the upper hand. As the dust settles, Clara stands over Tony, who is clutching a wound on his arm. You thought you could use our personal strife to your advantage, she says coldly. You thought wrong. Tony looks up, his eyes filled with disbelief and pain. You planned this? Clara nods, stepping back as Mike handcuffs Tony. We did. From the moment we knew you were sniffing around. It turns out, Clara and Rick had been pretending all along, their affair a ruse designed to bait Tony into revealing his intentions and resources. My trust in them, shaken by what I believed was a betrayal, was part of a larger play to protect us all from a more dangerous enemy. As we drive back, Clara takes my hand, squeezing it lightly. It was the only way we knew how to flush him out. "I'm sorry we had to deceive you." The complexity of their loyalty and deception leaves me speechless. As the first light of dawn begins to seep through the trees, I realize that in this line of work, nothing is ever as it seems, and sometimes, the greatest loyalty comes cloaked in layers of betrayal.